know how to build a great product. It's time to explore how we can build a great ecosystem that can support you in your entrepreneurial journey. So the panel that we've got coming up dives into some actionable steps needed to create a robust tech startup ecosystem. So I'm going to invite the panelists to the stage as I introduce them. So come to the stage, grab a seat. First, I want to welcome Stella Korpigosi, who, like I said earlier, has come all the way from Helsinki in Finland to be here. She is from Slush'D. And it's with thanks to Stella and her team that we can even run this event today. So come and grab a seat, Stella. Also, Johnny Clark, he is from Liverpool Slush'D. So last year, Johnny and I basically ran our events on the same day. We were the first Slush'D event in the UK, and today we are still the only Slush'D events. Johnny's event is next week in Liverpool, and it's a phenomenal speaker lineup. So really, really chuffed that Johnny's taken some time out of his day to drive all the way down to Cornwall from Liverpool, especially as I know how stressful the week before an event can be. So thank you, Johnny, for being here. And also Matt Vile, where are you? Here's Matt. So Matt is a product technologist from a Cornish company called High Yield. But Matt is also the CTO from CTO in residence of Canopy Community, who are an amazing international community of startup founders. And Matt is the CTO in residence and is helping us run the demo night tonight. The demo night's in Lisbon. I think you've run over 50 events now, and has completely transformed the startup community in Lisbon and Portugal. So it's really, really awesome that Matt's here. And we're going to talk to a little bit, the guys, about how we get this ecosystem going. So please give them a warm welcome while I grab a seat. So my first question really is to Johnny. When we sort of first met on Zoom a couple of years ago, one of the things that resonated with me is you said actually Cornwall and Liverpool have a huge amount in common. And so actually running these events together, launching Slush, the fact that we're both on the West Coast, the sea is our audience, half of it. We're overshadowed by other big cities, that things like investment and infrastructure make it a challenge for Cornwall and Liverpool to kind of succeed. But you yourself are a founder and now an angel investor. So what have you seen in Liverpool that's really worked, and what have you brought to make that change?
There's a few things in there. So before I got into tech, I was in economic development, and I don't really know how I fell into that. I don't know if mostly what I can put it down to is being obsessed with like city building games as a kid, like Pharaoh or Caesar 3, if anyone remembers them from like the late 90s and Age of Empires and stuff. But I have this sort of fascination of how places work, and obviously places aren't static. Like, you know, the whole reason if you drive through any part of this country, really, but particularly Liverpool, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of dereliction. There was, a lot of bad economic times and bad social times. And that's sort of, I guess, how I landed on doing this kind of thing at the intersection of startups and venture, because I love technology and, I like business and stuff like that. And also trying to apply that to making places that support those things. So, yeah, I think there's a huge number of similarities there, and I spend a lot of time doing the quite boring behind the scenes stuff, like policy work and stuff that isn't that glamorous, but actually when it goes well, you get these success stories. One of the things that really worked in Liverpool a few years back when I was acting as a freelance consultant alongside building my first SaaS company was having kind of people with the right kind of vision and energy in all sort of areas of your ecosystem. So I'm a big fan of the MIT REAP model, or 5-stakeholder model that Phil Budden and his team have pioneered over there. And that talks a lot about having the right kind of shared vision and shared energy across like academia, corporates, risk capital, startups, and then like local, national government and like the civic sector as well. So it can be quite hard to replicate that because it's a bit of a time-limited phenomenon in a lot of places. But increasingly, the role I do now is we're seeing a lot of places across the UK and indeed other parts of the world where, as a response to deindustrialization, places want to keep up with the new economy, and they're looking at models like that.
Fantastic, thank you. And you launched Baltic Ventures in Liverpool. How have you seen that sort of change the landscape in Liverpool? Was it fractured before? Have you managed to kind of pull that together?
Yeah, so I'm one of the sort of founding members of Baltic Ventures, and I helped do the really wordy like Green Book appraisal assurance process in the background, and I guess that's kind of the curse of having that economic development and tech hat on. But that was one of a number of interventions that the tech community made the case to the combined authority and all the other sort of ecosystem stakeholders that was needed in the wake of European regional development funding going away. And I know that, again, Cornwall was a big beneficiary of that. And, despite the sort of efforts of successive administrations, nothing has quite really plugged that gap when it comes to business support and other kind of economic development activities. So again, it was a bit like, the stars all aligned. You had like a really good team of people in the combined authority, in the other partners, and really just being able to sort of make the case and find evidence of what had worked in other ecosystems. And of course, one of the ones that we quoted quite strongly was Helsinki, because it's this port town of about 500,000 people. Nokia used to be there, then it wasn't. And the similarities to Liverpool are uncanny, because, a lot of our tech employment was dependent upon Sony, who, when they pulled out in, I think, 2008, 2009, it was really gloomy. A lot of jobs went. But actually from that, all of the really cool tech startups and scale-ups you see today in Liverpool, you can basically trace their roots back to that collapse, for lack of a better word.
Amazing, thank you. And that leads us perfectly over to Stella. For anyone who's never been to Helsinki before, what does the startup landscape look like in Helsinki?
Well, I would say a lot different than it did before Slush existed. So Slush started back in 2008. And perhaps one of my favorite stats before or regarding this change that has happened over the years with Slush is that back in year 2000, when Finnish university students and high school students were asked how many of them would want to be an entrepreneur, 1% said that they would want to be an entrepreneur. And then I think back in 2018 or something, this survey was done again, and the same question was asked, at how many of them would want to be an entrepreneur now. Over 40% of the Finnish high school and university students said that yes. So there has been a big, at least like a mindset change towards entrepreneurship that I think has created a lot of opportunities and made really the ecosystem different to what it was. And now that it's one of the most thriving cities in Europe.
Amazing, thank you. And Slush, like you said, has been going around 25 years. How did it begin?
It was actually started by a couple of entrepreneurs who wanted to create something for the other entrepreneurs that weren't that many, or startup entrepreneurs at least, that many back in 2008. And it started as a small event around 250 people, and then grew up to even the biggest years when we had over 20,000 people, and now making it back to being a little bit more focused with 13,000 people in the event, but bringing the best people around the world to Helsinki.
Amazing, thank you. How much do you think it's helped local startups operate on a global scale?
Well, I think for local startup, it has, of course, had a tremendous effect because it's quite unique to a country with 5 million people that we bring really the best investors from around the world, from all the way from US and around Europe and everything to their hometown in Helsinki. And of course with that you get the access to inspiration and people and investors that you wouldn't perhaps get otherwise. So definitely for the local startup, it has a really great effect, and hopefully for the whole of Europe as well.
Amazing. And yeah, like I say, Slush is awesome. So if you are thinking of going, it is on in November. I think there's only startup tickets left now. The main ones have sold out.
Yeah, for the attendees, I think you can still get Thursday passes where you get to see at least one day of the event. You get to see the amazing after party that we're also known for, to have fun and make connections there as well. So those and the startup tickets, and for investors as well.
Yeah, obviously I can't possibly vouch for the after parties, but yeah, the speakers are incredible. Over to Matt. So Canopy Community, you guys have mobilised the startup communities in multiple cities now. I know you launched London Tech Week while we were there in June. I think the YouTube channel, even a month ago, had 16,000 views on that demo night alone. What would you say are the key ingredients to creating a startup network that is also sustainable and impactful?
I think that's the really important part of it, making it sustainable. And I think there's so many things that could contribute towards making it effective. But when thinking about it, when you kind of boil it down, I think being consistent and adding value are probably the two main things if you're trying to run a community around startups. So by that I mean making sure that you're running events on a consistent basis, because then there's always kind of a point a point of contact with the startup, so they can easily get involved, and that can sometimes be you're sat in a room with two other people, but as long as you keep on doing it and building that network and building that community, then people will start knowing that there's a regular basis that it's happening, and start contributing. And I think if you can layer that in with some value, and by that I mean introducing valuable people within that community, so business owners or people with lots of experience in running startups, exiting startups, mentors that can get involved in terms of kind of maybe technology or marketing or some of the skills that sometimes founders don't have in their armory because they're focused on their product, then introducing them in kind of key moments within that community can really help it thrive. And I think when you add all of that together, that's when you get a community that kind of thrives but is also sustainable, because those community members will keep on coming back. And a lot of what we do at Canopy Community is volunteer based, so I volunteer my time as a CTO in residence, and do lots of conversations with early stage startups and some scale ups as well, helping them with their kind of technology decisions. But if you kind of add enough value to the network in doing that, then you can start kind of charging for memberships, and that's what we've kind of launched this year. So a paid for membership where we're trying to capture all of our knowledge transfer via an online platform, so that when our members join, there's actually a kind of a rich content framework for them to work through to help them on their kind of early steps. So I think when you add all of those things together, that really helps. I think if you're doing it in places like Lisbon, there's already a kind of really great scene in Lisbon for startups, kind of indie hacker culture there. I think that definitely helps. Obviously, from a government point of view and kind of local government kind of incentives around running that community in a startup area can help as well.
Brilliant. I was fortunate enough to join one of your demo nights in August, and the thing I really love about it is it's a demo, not a pitch. So it's all about getting feedback to maybe shape your product roadmap and put it in front of people who might want to use your product, kind of the ultimate virtual testing, really. And I know some of the pitches have come back and they've demoed several times. Have you got a story from one of your demo nights that you could share that highlights the kind of the power of that strong community?
Yeah, and I think the one that springs to mind is when you've been running a community for a certain amount of years, you've obviously got people who engage strongly with that community. Some people will kind of dip in and out depending on how sometimes life takes over. We all know that. But early on in the Canopy community, there was a startup founder who was launching a business which was around creating autonomous drones that would go up and survey wind turbines to see if there's any damage, to make sure that they were kind of booked in for maintenance, which traditionally had always been kind of a very manual person up a ladder type job. And he successfully grew that business and was active within the Canopy community. And several of the Canopy community members were kind of mentors to him. One of them was a non-executive director for him. And then he successfully exited that business and started doing some seed investments, but he actually brought that back to the network and did some seed investments in some of the Canopy startup businesses. So it's really nice to see kind of that circular where he really appreciated the value that he got from the community and decided to put it back in as well.
That's a really awesome story. And as Emmy was talking about this morning, that power of a network. People connect with people, and it's all about relationships. But on the investment piece, Johnny, I've kind of got a question for you here. You've gone through the founder journey, and now you're an investor yourself, and actually you're trying to grow that network for Liverpool. What does it take to attract investment that can support startups in a small community?
That's a really tough one, because there's a lot of sort of different effects and incentives and sort of phenomena at play. Anyone who's kind of tried to raise in the past 18 months to 2 years will know that it's much harder now than it was, say, in the immediate post-COVID era. And I think we're actually embarking on a bit of a new divergence in terms of like how capital markets more broadly function in the UK and the West right now. So I spend a lot of time right now reminding founders that, particularly if you're in software, right, with a very marginal cost of reproduction in terms of building your business, you're probably in a global market. You might live in UK, you might live in Liverpool, you might live in a village in the Highlands, but your customers are probably global, and your capital, your investors are probably global as well, and increasingly your staff tend to be global as well. It can be quite difficult to put together large rounds. There's people often don't like to lead. I think a lot of the sort of existing EIS funds across the north probably take a look at how I invest, which is almost always pre-revenue and based on the vibes, basically. I mean, that works for me financially, but also in terms of what I'm happy with. But I'm pretty sure the guys who run some of the EIS funds down the road think I'm a cowboy. So there's a lot of challenges there. It's around personal appetite and just bringing money in. Awesome,
thank you. Gosh, we're really, really low on time. So I'm just one more question then to Stella. What is the one thing that every tech ecosystem should have to help them succeed?
One thing. No, I don't think that I can give a direct answer to this, but I think like what you're doing here, just figuring out what's actually lacking in the community. There's not a single thing that can be replicated in all the places and that could magically fix the ecosystem or make it thrive in a way. So really seeing and looking into it and figuring out what's the bottleneck and what could be done in the first place to make it thrive even a tiny bit more.
Amazing, thank you. And thank you to all our panelists. Please give them a very warm round of applause.